right. We this morning started a lesson about the two songs of Moses, or I guess I should drop the word "the" and just say two songs of Moses. There are a pretty interesting comparison between these two. The one that we talked about this morning we could label as a song of deliverance or a song of praise. The children of Israel, having crossed over the Red Sea miraculously and having seen their enemies wiped out in Exodus chapter 15, when they're on the other side of the Red Sea and after the Egyptians have been drowned in the waves, they sing a song unto the Lord. Again, I think it's important to understand that. They weren't just singing just because, but they were singing a praise to God. And in that song, you see a declaration of who God is. You see a declaration of what God has done. You see a declaration of how God achieved this great deliverance. And then we see why God provided this deliverance. And we see there that by the end of this song, when just moments before or hours before they were not even sure they were going to be alive, they are now looking at God's promises that are yet to come, and they are focused on those, and they are confident that those things will occur. And so this starts out again as this praise and lifting up of God Almighty, thanking Him for what He's done, declaring who He is and His majesty and His wonder, and then talking about what His plans are for them and that confidence they have that those plans will be fulfilled. But we also ended this morning's message reading the verses that occur right after this song in Exodus chapter 15, and we find that within 3 days the children of Israel are murmuring again. They seem to have forgotten God's great deliverance. It wasn't that the thing they were faced with, no water, it wasn't that that wasn't a challenge, it wasn't that that wasn't a serious problem. The problem was that they had forgotten God could provide deliverance. And instead of going to God and asking for deliverance, they murmured and they complained. And it is a lesson for us, as we talked about this morning, that we want to make sure that we continually remember the things God has done. That we make sure that we're reminding ourselves of God's deliverance and God's promise and God's majesty, and that He is a God that fulfills His promises. We don't want to lose our joy. We don't want to lose the confidence that we have in the Lord's work. And it is important that we remember on a regular, reoccurring basis who He is, what He's done, and what His promises will be. Tonight, we're going to read a different song of Moses. It's actually even in a different book. It's at a much later time in Moses' life. And this time, though, however, this is going to be a song of judgment. This first song of Moses was a song of deliverance, a song of praise. But the next song is going to be a song of judgment. So if you would, turn in your Bibles to the book of Deuteronomy. And the song itself is really in Deuteronomy chapter 32. But we're going to start in Deuteronomy chapter 31 just to give you context of this song. Now, we're not going to read all of Deuteronomy chapter 31. I will give you a summary of it. So the background of this next song of Moses starts in chapter 31. This is where Moses is coming down to the end of his life. And there's a few things that happen in Deuteronomy chapter 31. One of them is that the mantle is passed from Moses to Joshua. This is kind of where Moses officially and formally passes this leadership fully and completely over to Joshua. Everybody knows by the end of chapter 31 that Joshua is the guy that the Lord has chosen. Joshua is the one that's going to lead them into the promised land. And they know by this time that Moses is not going. He actually even tells them that he is not going to cross over Jordan, that God has told him he is not going with them. That's some of what's happening in Deuteronomy chapter 31. 31. But if you look here in the first verse, verse 1, and Moses went and spake these words unto all Israel, and he said unto them, I am 120 years old this day. I can no more go out and come in. Also the Lord has said unto me, thou shalt not go over this Jordan. The Lord thy God, he will go over before thee. He will destroy these nations before thee, and thou shalt possess them. And Joshua, he shall go over before thee, as the Lord has said. And the Lord shall do unto them as he did to Sihon and Og, kings of Amorites, and unto the land of them whom he destroyed. And the Lord shall give them up before your face, that ye may do unto them according unto all the commandments which I have commanded you. Be strong and of a good courage, fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. That's a very famous verse, right? Be strong and of a good courage. He says, the Lord is with you. He will do these things. He's talking to the children of Israel. Lots of times we think of that verse being directed just at Joshua, and in a little bit it is. But the first time Moses said it, it seems as if he is telling all Israel, be strong and of good courage. Verse 7, and Moses called unto Joshua and said unto him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and of a good courage, for thou must go with this people unto the land which the Lord has sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it. And the Lord, he it is that doth go before thee. He will be with thee. He will not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Fear not, neither be dismayed. Now it's interesting as you think about Joshua, you have to wonder if when Moses was telling Joshua, be of good courage, be strong, be of good courage, he said unto him, for thou must go with this people. You wonder if Moses knew a little bit about what would lay in store for Joshua, because Moses had tried to lead these people. And Moses had seen the ups and the downs and how they were good one moment and whining and complaining and rebelling against God the next minute. And when he looked at Joshua and said, be strong and of good courage, you have to wonder, did he know a little bit about what Joshua was going to face? But he did. He tells them that the Lord is going to be the one that goes before them. This is not about me, Moses says. This is not about Joshua. This is about the Lord. Okay, and so that's the context here. The other thing you see, starting in verse 9, it says, and Moses wrote this law and delivered it unto the priests of the sons of Levi. Now if you read verses 9 down through verses 13, you'll understand that as Moses is coming down to the end of his life, he apparently has been writing this book of the law. He's finishing it. He finishes this book of the law. He gives it to the Levites for storage, and he also tells them that in verse 10, at the end of every 7 years in the solemnity of the year of release in the Feast of the Tabernacles, when all Israel is come to appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, thou shalt read this law before all Israel in their hearing. Now some people believe that when he said this, he was just talking about the book of Deuteronomy. Others believe, because of the way the Bible often talks about the book of the law being those first 5 books of the Bible, this is talking about all 5 books. We don't know necessarily. I think it probably is referring to all 5 books. Even if it's just referring to Deuteronomy, think about this. How'd you like to be in that church service? You guys think it's bad enough when I cover 1 chapter. How would you like to go through the entire book of Deuteronomy? We're going to come together, and you are going to sit and listen as I read all 34 chapters. Think about that. Every 7 years, he commanded that they should come together and read the law to the whole assembly. So, like I said, you guys get nervous when I cover 1 chapter. Moses commanded that every 7 years that the whole law should be read to everybody. That's going to take a little while, right? Don't worry, we're not going to do that today. So as we're thinking about what's leading up to the second song of Moses, we understand that Moses is telling them that he's going to die and that he can't go over into the promised land. He's telling them that Joshua is going to be the one that leads them. He's telling them they need to be strong and of good courage, because it's not about me, Moses. It's not about Joshua. It's about the Lord. He's the one that's going to lead you. Then he tells them, here's the completed law. I finished it. You take it, you protect it, and every 7 years you read the entire thing to the whole congregation of people. Because he wants them to know and understand, young, old, everything. But then in verse 16, you see this, verse 15. And the Lord appeared in the tabernacle in a pillar of a cloud, and the pillar of the cloud stood over the door of the tabernacle. And the Lord said unto Moses, Behold, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, and this people will rise up and go a-whoring after the gods of the strangers of the land, whither they go to be among them, and will forsake me, and break my covenant which I have made with them. Then my anger shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall befall them, so that they will say in that day, Are not these evils come upon us, because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day from all the evils which they have wrought, and that they have turned unto other gods. Now therefore write ye this song for you, and teach it to the children of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel. For when I shall have brought them into the land which I swear unto their fathers, that floweth with milk and honey, and they shall have eaten and filled themselves and waxen fat, then will they turn unto other gods and serve them, and provoke me, and break my covenant. That is going to be the context of this song. Things are actually going good right now. They're about to cross over into the promised land. Joshua is going to lead them, and they're going to have great victories. Moses is coming down to the end of his life. He's passed the mantle over to Joshua. He's told them to be strong and be of good courage. Follow the Lord. And then Moses gets a message from the Lord, and the Lord says, Moses, this is what's going to happen. They're going to follow me for a while, and then they're going to abandon me. They're going to forsake me. They're going to forget me. They're going to go following after the other gods, and I will turn my back on them. And what I want you to do is I want you to write a song, and I want you to teach it to them, and it is to be a witness to them. You could look at this witness both as a witness of, if you don't follow my commands, this is what's going to happen. You could look at it as after they have disobeyed God, after they have had God hide his face from them, and they're suffering much because of their sin. It's a witness to them of why this is happening. This is a song of judgment, but a song of witness. It's a declaration of, this is what you've done, and this is the repercussion. Totally different than this morning's song, isn't it? This morning was of great rejoicing, great remembrance of what God has delivered us from. But listen, there can also be a song of witness and a song of judgment. You had me. You knew what my commands were. You followed me for a little bit, and then you forsook me. And here's the judgment of that. This is a song of judgment. That's the context as you go into Deuteronomy chapter 32. So keep those things in mind as we do this. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is the Lord specifically told him, you teach it to them so their children will know. This was a song that was supposed to be passed down from generation to generation to generation. For those that were following God, a witness and a reminder to stay following God. Because if you don't, this is what will happen. And for that generation that forsook God and saw God's judgment, God didn't want them to not know why they were being judged. This is why. This is why you're seeing judgment. Now let's turn over to the Deuteronomy chapter 32, and we'll read this all the way through. It is a long song. It's like 43 verses long, okay? So bear with me as we read through this. He covers a lot of ground as he goes through this. Again, a full 43 verses. And I know that it starts in verse 1, Because it says in chapter 31, the last verse, "And Moses spake in the ears of all the congregation of Israel the words of this song until they were ended." Verse 1, "Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. My doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. Because I will publish the name of the Lord, and ascribe ye greatness unto our God. He is the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are judgment, a God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he." It actually starts in a very similar manner to the first song. Remember how the first song started? It started about declaring who God was, His majesty, that His triumph is glorious, that He's a man of war, that He provides great deliverance. This song starts the same way. It starts with who God is. He is the rock. His work is perfect. For all His ways are judgment, a God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is He. He is the solid rock. He's our rock of defense. He's the rock on which we stand, right? He's perfect. That means He's complete and without blemish, is what that word there means if you look it up. All His paths are judgment, and everything He does is right, without error, perfectly. His judgments are even correct. When He judges perfectly, without error. He's a God of truth, with no evil, completely just, completely right. Now that's how this song starts. Now, if you're the children of Israel, Moses is about to die, Joshua's taking over, you're going to be going over into the promised land soon, and Moses has told you, be strong, be of good courage, it's God that's going with you, don't be dismayed. And then he starts to sing this song. He says, I got a song to teach you. He starts to teach you this song, and he's talking about God as our rock, He's perfect, He's just, everything is right. And then he says, they have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of His children. They are a perverse and crooked generation. Do ye thus requite the Lord, O foolish people and unwise? Is not He thy father, and hath brought thee? Hath He not made thee and established thee? Remember the days of old, and consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee. I actually don't think that the people he's talking to right now, if you look at what they're about to do with Joshua, they seem to actually be in a good place. But remember, this is a song of witness for what happens when Moses and Joshua are gone. Don't be a perverse people. Don't be corrupted with the things of the place that you're going. If you corrupt yourself with those things into, you won't look like His children. It's foolish and unwise. Remember that He's your Father. Those were the things He's telling them. Ask your fathers. Now again, I think the generation that's living here is about to see some marvelous things. They're going to cross over Jordan, and when they do, just like the Red Sea, the Lord's going to part it, and they're going to cross over. And He's going to tell them, you pick up these stones, and you place them here, and when your children ask you what those stones are about, you tell them about what God did for you. And then He says in the song, you ask your fathers about what God did for them. You ask the elders of this nation what God did for them. They'll tell you. But you guys, again, remember this is future. God told Moses in chapter 31 that there's coming a time when they will forsake me. This is an interesting song because it's talking like present tense about something that hasn't happened yet. There's coming a time when they won't look like my children. And they're going to be perverse. And it's almost as if they don't know God. He says, go ask the elders, go ask your fathers, they'll tell you. But this generation, man, it's like God never done anything. Verse 8, when the Most High divided the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. Ask the fathers, ask the elders. There was a time when all the nations were divided and God chose a people to be his. And they were special. And they were to be his inheritance. Matter of fact, he took them from nothing. In verse 10 it says, he found him in a desert land and in the waste, howling wilderness, and he let him out, and he instructed him, and he kept him as the apple of his eye. The apple of his eye. I don't know, every time you guys hear that phrase, do you think about somebody looking down and you got this precious little, it has nothing to do with fruit. Apple of his eye has nothing to do with fruit. It's actually talking about the innermost precious part of your eye and how it's protected. You've got the eyelid, you've got the lens, and you've got all this stuff that protects the eye. He is God's chosen people, protected people, precious, taken care of. Our eye is also sometimes so delicate. You think about the delicate of our eye. And yet the way God has designed our body, it's protected, it's cared for. Man, these people are the apple of God's eye. And yet, what have they done? They've forsaken him. Taken from nothing, taken from the wilderness, led, instructed, kept as the apple of his eye. Verse 11 goes even further. As an eagle stirreth up her nest, fluttering over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings, taketh them, beareth them on her wings. So the Lord alone did lead him, and there was no strange God with him. He says, you ask the elders, you ask your fathers where you came from. What happened to you? What did God do for you? God found you when you were nothing, and he delivered you. He led you. He instructed you. He protected you. He treated you like an eagle does its young, protects them with its wings, flies them where they need to go, takes them from place to place. And yet, you forsook me. And I also don't miss the fact in verse 12, so the Lord alone did lead him, and there was no strange God with him. What was the context of why this song was written? Moses was told by the Lord in chapter 31, there is coming a time when my people will go a-whoring after other gods. And in the song, he specifically says, you remember all those things that were done for you as a nation, that were done for you as a people. You remember this, it was me alone. There was no other God with me. Verse 13, he made him ride on high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields. He made him to suck honey out of the rock, and oil out of the flinty rock, butter of kine, milk of sheep, fat of lambs, rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats. With a fat of kidneys of wheat, thou didst drink the pure blood of the grape. You know what that's describing? Remember how it started. He found him in a wilderness, and he let him out, and he educated him, and he took care of him, and he led him where he needed to be, to the point of he became abundantly rich. That's what that's describing. A time when they would have everything they needed. God had provided for them richly the pure blood of the grape. That is the pure wine of the grape. He says, look, remember the bitter waters that you had when you first crossed the Red Sea? There's coming a time when you'll be in the land of promise and you'll have nothing but the best. No more days when I have to take some kind of a tree and throw it into the bitter waters to make it taste good miraculously. You will have of the natural abundance of the promised land. But remember what God said in chapter 31. When is it that the children of Israel started to forsake God? It's when things were looking the best. It is a good remembrance for us. And I've said it often. Freedom is a wonderful thing. Don't think that freedom can't be in and of itself our downfall, our temptation. Because the children of Israel oftentimes fell the furthest away from God when they were at their richest. Matter of fact, in verse 15 it says, "But Jeshurun waxed fat." Every commentary I read says that this is a name for the nation of Israel. This is a different name for the nation of Israel. But Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. "Thou art waxen fat, thou art grown thick, thou art covered with fatness." Then he forsook God which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. It's at the time when you had everything you could possibly need, everything you could possibly want. All of those times of trial and trouble and wilderness and fighting and war and trying to get where God wanted you to be. You get there, God makes peace with everybody. God puts you in this great place. You get abundantly everything you want. You get fat and you get lazy. That's basically what he's saying. You get fat and you get lazy. And you start to lowly esteem the things of God. It's not even necessarily that they immediately just forsook everything about God. Notice that it says that they lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. It's not a big deal. Whatever. It's not even that they said it wasn't real or it didn't happen or it didn't exist. Just no big deal. I got everything I need. I don't need anything. I'm good. They become corrupted. Now listen, can a person become corrupted for the opposite? They're tired of all the troubles. They're tired of all the trials. They're tired of everything always not working out the way they want it to work out. Can somebody get corrupted? Yeah, absolutely. There's people that have done that. Sometimes, actually, maybe less than we think, because that's the time when we expect it. But if you study history, you'll often find that the people of God are at their weakest when they're the most blessed. They get fat and they get lazy. And the things of this world distract them so frequently that they lightly esteem the things of God. Or they get arrogant, overconfident. They forget where all that stuff came from. So you start to see here as this is going on, you see who he is and how great he is. You see this remembrance that you need to remember what I've done for you. But then also you see this warning when you start to get everything you need and you start to have an abundance. That's when you forsake me. Remember, this is being written before it ever happened. How many times in the Bible are we actually told, hey, you're being punished or you're about to be punished because you did this? This is actually unlike most of those times when Elijah or one of the prophets would come and say, this is going to happen because you're worshiping other gods. This is written in a context of you haven't done it yet. But if and when you do, this is going to be the outcome. As we keep reading here, it says in verse 16, they provoked him to jealousy with strange gods. With abominations provoked they him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Of the rock that begat thee, they are unmindful, and has forgotten God that formed thee. So what happened? God describes it. They got fat, they got lazy, and then what happened? They started seeking after other gods. Not only that, but they provoked him to anger with abominations. That word abominations is just this idea of wickedness. They sacrificed to devils instead of to God. You study some of the gods that the nation of Israel got off into, wicked, wicked stuff. I mean, there was some that indication would be is that they actually took the children and burned them on the altar to these gods. Alive. I mean, wicked, wicked stuff. Gods to whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. He says, I've been with you this whole time. I have led you, protected you, taught you. And then you go off and worship this new God you never heard of. You think about America today, and I am not one that, by the way, takes the nation of Israel and says when it's talking about the nation of Israel, it's really talking about America. I don't believe that. It's talking about the nation of Israel, okay? But there are some parallels, and there are some practical applications we can learn from it. You look at what happens in this world today, whether you're talking about America or even other nations, and you know what I have seen in people? They are starting to follow after gods just for the newness of it. It's almost like a fad. People that have never been brought up around Buddha or the Hindu gods or whatever else, right? Suddenly you see this guy from, some small country town that's been born and raised around whatever, and it's like, well, I'm a Buddhist. I worship these Hindu gods. Some of them, it's like you really get the idea. They're just doing it to be different. That's kind of what you see here. I've been with you the whole time, and now you're off. You're going to serve some God you never heard of till recently. They just completely forgot what God had done for them. As we keep going here, for time's sake, it says not only did they worship these other gods, did they sacrifice unto devils, did they worship these new gods. It says in verse 18, of the rock that begat thee, thou art unmindful. That word unmindful means out of your memory. You just don't even think about God. You go about your life, you do your thing, and you just don't think about Jehovah. And the last half of that verse says, and has forgotten God that formed thee. The very God that created you, both as an individual and formed them as a nation. You just completely forgot he even existed. Again, what do you see in this world today? People are following after every little god that pops up all over the place. Or just forgetting God altogether, saying there is no God. We think we don't deal with this. We really do. We think we don't deal with this today. But you look at the culture of the world today. Let's even just take what's popular here in the U.S. Even for Christians. And listen, I'm going to be honest with you. Some of what I'm about to say, these are movies I've watched. These are things that I've had in my household before. But I want you to think about the theme of this world today. What's popular? Star Wars. Okay. The Force. There's good and there's bad, and it can control the elements. You think that's not a religion? You better look closer. Matter of fact, the people that are Jedis, they walk around in robes, and they're almost like a religious order. Listen, Star Wars preaches a religion. How about Marvel? You got Thor, the god of thunder. He's a pagan god. He is actually somebody that in parts of this world, historically, and even, I think, becoming more so, there's people that actually believe he exists. Or think about all of the witchcraft. And it's not even negative anymore. Man, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, the Marvel stuff that I just talked about. What's common in all of those? Good witches and warlocks. The heroes in all of those stories that I just talked about are what? They follow witchcraft. All of those things in the last few generations, maybe generation is the wrong way to say that, but those things are very popular, right? I get it. They're just movies, and they're just entertainment, and I understand that. But I am saying we need to be careful because it has permeated our entertainment. It's not even just a little bit anymore. All of the most popular stuff is either going to be about pagan gods or witchcraft or worshiping nature. It's just rampant. For you and me, it's just entertainment. You know, there's actually people that believe a lot of the stuff that's talked about in those movies. They understand that those are movies. I'm not saying that. There are people that worship that type of stuff. And yet in the American culture, it's everywhere and we're okay with it. Be careful that your entertainment doesn't suddenly just become normal and okay. I often wonder how the nation of Israel got to some of these places they got to. And is it because that slowly, generation after generation, we became more okay with more things and unmindful of the impacts that they actually have? To the point of where our children's children suddenly are actually maybe following those things? It doesn't just happen overnight. There are a reason that generations fall away from God. But as you continue to go through this, he talks about the fact that in verse 19, and when the Lord saw it, he abhorred them because of the provoking of his sons and his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be. For they are a very forward generation, children in whom is no faith. He says, I look on this generation and what I see is a children of no faith. They sit there fat, happy, and lazy. No faith. And his anger is kindled. He says in verse 21, they moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy, which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. We talked about this already when we were going through the book of Romans. This part of this chapter is actually quoted in Romans, and it's used to talk about how that God turns to the Gentiles. And part of that turning to you and me as Gentiles is actually a fulfillment of the judgment that God cast on the nation of Israel for abandoning and forsaking him. And part of it's referred to right here. He says that he's going to provoke them to jealousy by turning to a nation that was not his. That's talking about the Gentiles. Verse 22, for a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn in the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. I will heap mischiefs upon them. I will spend mine arrows upon them. They shall be burnt with hunger, devoured with burning heat, with bitter destruction. I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them, and the poisons of serpents of the dust. The sword without and terror within shall destroy both young men and the virgin, the suckling also with the man of gray hairs. I said, I will scatter them into the corners. I will make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. This is a song that they are to memorize and to learn and to teach to their children. You forsake me. You abandon me. This is the consequence. I will turn my face from you. I will hide it from you. And when I hide my face from you, horrible, horrible things will happen. Consuming fire, beasts, poison, sword. And in the verse about sword, it says, talks about outside being the sword, but inside being the terror. Man, he's just described a horrible place to be. And I'm careful when I say this. You think about the times in history, the nation of Israel has at times suffered some things very much described here. It's part of the condemnation for forsaking and going after other gods. He even says that he's going to scatter them into the corners. There came a time God would look at the nation of Israel and they'd start to get off track, and he would send punishment and chastisement. They would get back in track. And it just went back and forth for generations. And there came a time when he said, I'm done. And he literally scattered them across the whole earth. Now, as you look at this, though, he says in verse 27, were it not that I feared the wrath of the enemy, lest their adversaries should behave themselves strangely, and lest they should say, our hand is high, and the Lord hath not done all this. They are a nation void of counsel. There is neither understanding in them. Oh, that they were wise, and that they understood this, and that they should consider their latter end. Listen, that he's going to do all this, and there's going to be some nations that look on and go, man, this is all about us. God's nothing. He says, no, they need to think about their latter end. They're without counsel, and they need to think about their latter end, how they're going to come to destruction. Verse 30, how should one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, except their rock had sold them and the Lord had shut them up? How is it possible that a nation that had been so blessed, literally a small group could come in and chase thousands of them? All their strength is for naught, in other words. Listen, the power is with God. Whether you look at a mighty nation or a tiny little nation, really what it amounts to is, what does God want? God can overthrow the mighty nation. He can take the little and make the big run away. Israel's been on both sides of that. They've seen where they were the small and God provided victory. They've seen where they should have had victory and they lost it. There's coming a time where they'll see it again, where they're the smallest and all will come against them. And God will provide deliverance for them. Keep going. Verse 31, for their rock is not as our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges. For their vine is the vine of Sodom and the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall, their clusters is bitter. Their wine is the poison of dragons, and their cool venom of asps. Is not this laid up in store with me and sealed up among many my treasures? Listen, he's saying, look, they have fallen after the other gods. They've fallen after the people. They have fallen after the people of the land instead of following me. But listen, what those people offer is not like the rock that you have. Remember all those rich blessings that God can provide? What they provide is the exact opposite. The best wine that you had before, now you're going to have nothing, bitterness of gall. Verse 35, to me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. For the Lord shall judge his people, and repent himself for his servants, when he seeth that their power is gone, and there is none shut up or left. And he shall say, where are their gods, their rock in whom they trusted? Listen, there's coming a time, yes, when God brings this judgment. He's brought this judgment and continues to bring this judgment. There's coming a time when he will see that they're at their end, that everything's been taken away from them. He's going to ask this question, where's the rock that they trusted in? The little rock that they trusted in? Where are the gods that they went a-whoring after? But then you know what's going to happen? Verse 38. He's talking about where are the gods they trusted, which did eat of the fat of their sacrifices, drank the wine of their offerings. Let them rise up and help you and be your protection. Those gods that you went after, they can't help you. They never have helped you. Where are they? But listen, he says in verse 39, see now, even I am he. There is no God with me. I kill, I make alive, I wound, I heal. Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand. He says, look, you guys went a-whoring after other gods, and those gods didn't do anything for you. I need you to see that all power is in me. I'm the one that holds life and death in my hands. I'm the one that can heal. I'm the one that can destroy. No other God. Only me. It says in verse 40, for I lifted up my hand to heaven and say, I live forever. Verse 41, if I whet my glittering sword and mine hand take hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to mine enemies and reward them that hate me. That whetting of a sword is to take out your sword from its shield and to sharpen it in preparation. It is if I take it out and I cast judgment, I will render vengeance. I will reward my enemies with what they deserve. This is declaring, we've already been talking about God's judgment on the nation for forsaking him. But what you start to get to in the end of this is those nations that then look at Israel and they condemn it and they start to think that they have aspirations. You start to actually see, as you get to the end of this song, God turning on the world in judgment and delivering his children. Listen. He's talking about reward of them that hate him. Verse 42, I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, and that with the blood of the slain and of the captives from the beginning of revenges upon the enemy. Rejoice, O ye nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants, and will render vengeance to his adversaries, and will be merciful unto his land and to his people. The last verse of this song is talking about when God turns his face back to his people. And he's talking about his mercy and how he will show mercy to them. This is actually another verse that's quoted in the New Testament. And it's actually quoted in the New Testament, instead of rejoice, O ye nations, it says, O ye rejoice, ye Gentiles. You and me will see, or the Gentiles will see this time and can rejoice when the Lord turns back to his people. But God wants us to know in this song where judgment really lies. Whether that is judgment for the nation of Israel for forsaking him and a-whoring after other gods, or whether it's for those people that reject God in later days and God comes and exacts vengeance on them. Judgment is in God's hands. Jesus Christ came into this world as a mighty Savior, a Redeemer, a Deliverer, meek, kind, loving, giving of himself. But he is one day coming back, and he will bring a sword of judgment with him. And it describes his judgment as literally his swords, his arrows drinking up the blood of his enemies. No one being able to stand in his path. This song, so much different than the song this morning. The song this morning was about God's deliverance and his mercy and how we can rejoice in that. This song is a song of witness. Don't forsake me. Don't turn your back on me. Follow me. Don't seek after other gods. Don't worship other things. And this was very specific to the nation of Israel. And it contains both that promise of judgment, that much of has already happened. I think it also starts to talk about that coming time when God turns his face back to them. It is very much to them. But listen, just like the other one has some practical applications for us, so does this one. Don't forsake God. You may be God's chosen people. God can still chasten you when you don't follow him. Seek him. Follow him. Make sure that you're serving him. Don't become fat and lazy. And she laughs every time I say that. But man, it is so easy to see that in ourselves. Definitely to see that in our nation. God is a thing that's just kind of there, and we're kind of unmindful of him as a nation, right? Even those that claim him. Yeah, God, I like him. It's at that time when God completely cut off and said, I'm done. Be careful. Make sure that you're following God. Stay close to him. Remember the song of deliverance. Remember the song of rejoicing. It will help you to stay close to God, right? Of these two songs, which one do you want to be the one that you get to sing? We actually should be singing both. We hope that we're in the first one. And the second one we're just singing as a warning and a reminder. May the second one always just be a reminder to not go that way versus a judgment for having went that way. All right? The Songs of Moses, both of them sung by Moses and the nation of Israel. Two totally different things. Two totally different messages. Okay? Remember them both. All right. We're going to go ahead and be dismissed in a word of prayer. Thank you for your patience today. I know it went a little bit long. That is a long song, and we only kind of skimmed through sections of it, but hopefully it gave you enough to understand and maybe even dig back and study on it yourself. But we're going to go ahead and be dismissed in a word of prayer. Thank you for being here. Brother Josh, would you dismiss us, please?